This is Adam Simbe with This Week in Perspective. Every 24th of October every year, the United Nations celebrates its founding day, and this year it was celebrated. It's celebrating actually 24 years since the charter establishing it was first signed in San Francisco, United States, in 1945. The UN Day highlights the enduring ideals of the Charter, which entered into force in 1948. 74 years ago, actually in 1944, 74 years ago, amid stormy seas, the Charter remains a shared moral anchor, says the Secretary General Antonio Guterres in his statement marking the day, which has been celebrated since 1948 as the UN Day. The United Nations has declared climate change the defining issue of our time, since the global theme this year is Our Planet. However, Tanzania has chosen a theme focusing on investing on women and girls, which says women and girls at the forefront of achieving the global goals. I suppose those global goals include the Sustainable Development Goals. To discuss this day, I'm joined by four competent panelists who will help us understand why the UN Day is being celebrated. On my right is Rebecca Muna. She's the Chief Executive of the Forum for Climate Change. Ernest Sisala is Senior Manager at the United Nations Development Program. Felicite Bwana, another Senior Officer at the United Nations Fund for Population Activities, UNFPA. And Badru Juma, yes. UN, okay, but he's involved in the Sustainable Development Goals in Dar es Salaam office, the youngest of the panelists. But viewers, I welcome you to the program and thank you, the two of you, for making my program gender balanced today. I'm happy today, there's gender balance. Two ladies, one on my right, next to me, and the other one on my left, a bit far from me, but close in terms of discussion. So, welcome again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, let's set the ball rolling, and I'll ask Ernest Sala to begin. What is the United Nations Day? How important is the day? And should the world or the global, should the world, including Tanzania, celebrate its founding?
Yeah, the United Nations Day is a day when we remember when the UN Charter was formally ratified. As we all know, if we may go back a bit to the history, in year 1945, in June, the United Nations members, the founding members, met in San Francisco, whereby they came up with the UN Charter. Then in October, same year, the Charter was formally ratified. So that has been adopted globally, that will be a day, because it's very important to commemorate that day, because that is really, the Charter is the one which came into force after the devastating World War II. So for the world, it holds some sort of very unique significance. And hence, the General Assembly made it, asked the member states to observe the day. And if we remember, in 1948, that's when the day, when the United Nations Day was declared, and all member states were asked to observe the day whenever it comes to 24th of October.
Okay. Yeah. You say when the member states came together and formulated the charter, which brought about the birth of the UN. How many member states were there? Because that was just after the Second World War.
At that time, I think there were only the 5 permanent Security Council members. You know, these were allies during the World War II.
Yeah.
So after the World War II, they came together just to see how would they establish a different global order after the war.
Thank you. Let me turn to the right now and ask Rebecca Muna. The global theme for the UN Day is our planet, referring to climate change and calling for each member state to do something to protect protect climate change or to mitigate climate change. Why do you think climate change should be all of a sudden become so important for the UN system, even to bring it as a theme for celebration?
Thank you very much. When you look at the climate change issue, it's not really something that has recently gained attention of the UN. This has started way back, and UN is among the platform in the world that has tried to address issues related to environment and climate change. And actually, some of the agencies under the UN, like UN United Nations Program on Environment, together with the World Meteorological Organization, actually took a bold step, 1982, I think, establishing a scientific body or intergovernmental panel on climate change to inform the UN decision addressing climate change. So historically, UN has interest on climate change. But of recent, actually, it has become a global issue, especially after the signing of Paris Agreement, where the globe is seeking nations to raise ambitions to cut emissions. And UN has taken it forward. And for the first time, actually, during the United Nations General Assembly, the UN General Secretary hosted the first UN Climate Change Summit. And I think this is a continuation of that effort, kind of, drawing attention of actors in the globe to take seriously the issue of climate change, because it is becoming a systematic issue that affects various development efforts, including the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals. And I think this is why climate change has become extremely important. And the way it is being looked now, climate change is not only the environmental issue, it is an issue which goes beyond the environment. So it's being related to energy, it's being related to water, it's being related to industries, it's being related to almost everything that is core.
Including poverty.
Including poverty, yes. So this is why climate change now is a core of development processes. And
okay, thank you, Rebecca. Young man, it's your turn also to say something. You work or you are involved in the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yes.
Now, do you think the kind of coming here while the UN is marking 74 years? Because the goals set were also discussed and passed by the General Assembly in New York. So why do you think Sustainable Development Goals are that important?
Yeah, thank you so much. When the SDGs or Sustainable Development Goals were passed year back 2015, we realized that they availed 17 goals. And to me personally, I believe that was a series of 17 challenges that are facing the globe at large. But also, on the other hand, there are opportunities to the world, to the key players who are in the playing field. Now, for the Sustainable Development Goals relating to the UN Day, but also we have to think about when the UN was formed back in just after Second World War, the repercussions caused by the war, they were much far away, affecting the globe at large. We're looking at issues of peace, looking at issues of security, human rights, poverty. All these consequences they are hindered by occurrence of instabilities. Now, going back to Sustainable Development Goals, as we are themes that are related, looking at the global level, action on planet and climate change, there are various ways how climate relates to Sustainable Development Goals. When talking about poverty, there is a huge relation between climate and poverty. To economies or communities where climate change, there are no actions that are in place, the communities are likely to face into like scorched poverty.
Why?
Yeah, and simply because looking at the economic activities first, if it's agriculture, you find like there's no rainfall, land degradation, soil erosion.
Too much rain?
Yes, too much rain at time, flooding, it also happened. But also looking at in terms of resourcing and financing, as the Secretary General normally puts, that climate change is the greatest threat of our time, because there are communities that they don't have anything to do about it. So it's beyond ourselves. Instead of walking, we need to run now. So linking to Sustainable Development Goals and the UN Day, we are not only celebrating the birthday of the UN, but we are looking at how far we've gone in terms of implementing the Sustainable Development Goals, but also finding the way forward.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Let me turn back to Ernest Sarah. The UN has survived 74 years. According to the Secretary General, amid problems and conflicts in the world, one would say global problems, including conflicts, are still there. So what has the UN done at 74? Is there progress? Do you think there are signs that these global problems will be resolved? And is it only by the UN?
Yeah, thank you. It's true that despite the existence of the UN, global problems are still there. Conflicts, wars, we are all witnesses to that. But one can also we can also imagine what would have happened if the UN was not there. If you try to draw that scenario, then we think what we are seeing, maybe the world as it is now would not have been. Possibly would have the worst scenario case would have been the case. The very possibly, if we are to become students of history, if we look back, whereby the world faced two major catastrophic conflicts, the World War I and World War II. Those basically, one can say basically is because there was no forum, no platform where countries who are at loggerheads or nations which were not in good terms could come together in dialogue. So, to me, I think the existence of UN has been very helpful to the world, and it will continue to be helpful, despite the kind of conflicts we are seeing, some of the wars. Those wars and conflicts could be worse without the UN. The presence of UN provides a platform for mediation. UN provides an avenue for dialogue, even when the countries are at war. And that was a way of also keeping peace. We have seen conflicts which have happened in the world, across the world, and Africa is a typical example whereby we had quite a number of conflicts.
And we're still having them.
And you're still having them. But the very mere presence of UN has mitigated the effect of the wars. and to some extent has been able to even to bring to an end some of the conflicts.
The Tanzania and the UN system together have come up with a different theme from the global one, that putting the interests of women and girls or whatever in investing in them and all that. Why did they decide to go or to come up with their own theme? Is this part of the UN acceptable strategy that the global theme is there, but at the country level, which is member states, can also have their own theme? How do you link the two then?
I think, thank you so much. I think I'll go back to what my colleagues Badru has said, because I think the Tanzania theme is so much linked to the SDGs, and the climate change is part of the SDGs, one of the goal. And again, when you look into the context, not only in Tanzania but in different countries, women and children, when you develop a woman, I think you remember Mwalimu Nyerere said, when you develop a woman, you're developing a nation. But most of the challenges which are really linked to the climate change affect women and children, as I said earlier. So putting women and children or girls in a forefront, you're talking more of how do we address the challenges which are related to climate change. But how do we want to protect our planet? Because the effect of climate change is affecting our planet. But what do? We should deal with issues which can really help us to be able to moderate some of the issues which have impact in the majority of people in the world. And there's my colleague was talking about what is the UN going to continue doing, apart from the war, apart from what is happening, apart from that the UN is operating in a more challenging environment than before, but still, UN is still more focused now in terms of becoming agile and accountable to what actually is happening, and of course, focusing more on the real needs of the real people. Because if you get out of your focus, then it becomes more challenging. But if you focus, to keep your focus straight, it's easier to deal with the key issues of why the UN was even created. So that's why, for me, I think the Tanzania team, they did well to get out of the box, to think wider and broadly on how do we contextualize the main theme, because it's broad. When you say climate change, there are so many things you can come up with as part of the addressing the main theme. So for me, I do feel that I think it was a good idea to come up with this a bit narrow theme, which can help us to think widely while we are maintaining the context of the main theme. That's what I can say.
Do you share that? Do you share that comment?
Yeah, I think I agree with Felista. And actually, the UN Tanzania, what they have done, they've just unpacked the global theme and demystify it and make it more relevant to the global theme. And when you're looking at climate change, again, there are a lot of gender issues. There are a lot of gender issues. And the end, women, girls, and children are mostly affected by the impact of climate change. Not only they are affected mostly by the climate change, but again, this is the group in the society that have limited resources. They have limited spaces for decision making. But again, when you look at realities on the ground, women are actually, for example, in the context of Tanzania, women contribute a lot in the livelihood of our communities. And
not contributing much in the promoting climate change, or it's the opposite?
I would say yes, they are the actors and change agents on the ground. Why I'm saying that? When we are talking, for example, who are the food providers at household level? When you come even at household level, who are the provider of energy which is required at household level? And in the end, you'll find a woman who is concerning with water at the household level, it's again a woman. So, and this is why we are saying if we put women and girls in the forefront of addressing the global goals, it means the global goals, including addressing food security, nutrition, access to water, and all these other productive activities on the ground. So this theme is extremely relevant. And again, I would say UN has gone extra mile, you know, to unpack the most needy in our society. And unfortunately, when you talk about women, people say, you are gender people, you know, always come with, but there are realities on the ground. You know, when we talk about who is from morning to evening, even if I talk about energy, you know, from morning a woman would need energy to cook food, the breakfast. And again, we'll go to seek for water. And again, we'll also come back and prepare food for lunch.
Well, the man is just sitting.
No, no, really. No, there are other economic activities which are kind of facilitated. You know, which are kind of facilitated. But when you look at, and again, let me go back to my example of energy. We're talking about using of firewood, using charcoal. It's an area which, again, is not regulated, is not facilitated. So you find women struggle by themselves, find their own means to meet the ends means of the family. Even in agriculture, these are the ones actually, you know, working for food to meet the family food requirement. But now we have challenge of nutrition. Because of the climate change, now nutrition becomes an issue. And again, when you look at all the effort rallying around, you'll see this is the area that has been, you know, left out. It hasn't been paid attention. So when we look at a woman and her surrounding, you'll find that there's a lot that can be done. We have economic contribution of women which is not accounted for. And if this one is accounted for, it means in the end we look how women significantly contribute even in economic activities of which they are not part of the GDP and national like economic actors. You see that women contribution are not
Are men having any voice in all this what we've said? Or we just sit there because you women assume that we are only receivers and our contribution is passive?
There's a lot of empowerment going on, of which will empower women now to voice out, because traditionally most of these needy and facilitative environment for women has been left out, whether it is a man fault or is a systematic gap which is there. It's a societal gap. So, and for me, when you put women and girls in the forefront, it means you are creating a very important entry point in addressing all these other challenges. And for me, this is an area where we can have multiplier effect, because when you address issues related to climate change, focusing on women and girls, it means you ignite something which will have a multiplier effect in our economy, and eventually we're going to achieve the global goals. So
the global sustainable development goals. Yes.
Yes.
Badru,
Yes.
Taking into account the sustainable development goals, which are basically UN goals in agreement with the member states, do you think the UN as a whole has been effective in delivering, first? Second, stimulating development in member states? And has this succeeded in resolving global problems as
Yes, so
said earlier?
yes, so by and large, the existence of the UN, just like my peer had mentioned earlier, like what if we had imagined the UN wasn't existing, what could have happened? So we could have far devastating effects. We couldn't even have existed at this level. But then looking at, like for instance, one of the first goal of Sustainable Development Goals on poverty, and the UN is determined before or by 2030 to have cleared there should be no any existence of any sort of poverty. And the UN has tried to reduce poverty at different levels. However, as poverty is decreasing, the inequality gap is still widening.
Are they mutually?
Yeah, like the haves and the haven't. So the gap is widening. But also you find like there are other cross-cutting issues when you like addressing poverty. You realize that like some communities are left behind, because one thing like poverty has multiplier effect, as Talia mentioned, in terms of it affects education directly. You find like the one that can afford education, they can have quality education. The one that cannot have like the purchasing power, they're likely to lose out of the system. But also looking at issues related to hunger, you know, there are different UN agencies that are approaching that kind of area, helping communities in terms of how they can mitigate even climate to have better food supplies, better food production. Looking at issues related to healthy, it's good we have Madam Felista here. So UNFPA is in that space, trying to reach out to even the area that no one could have reached in terms of rural deep areas, helping women and children to access better and sustainable health systems. Also coming to education, you know, education has been one of our greatest challenge, you know, trying to see how the kind of education you can have that can match with the 21st skills centuries, but also trying to have the education that can help us, the young people mainly, to have decent work at the workplace.
I expected that,
yes,
because
so,
you're young.
Yes, so, but also looking at also other areas in terms of partnership.
Like employment?
Yes,
What
even
is
employment. Now on employment, for instance, we have one agency, ILO. You know, it has been in that space, but also supported with other agencies in trying to see how they can support even the government, but also even other key groups of young people and other generation in terms of having decent work. And when talk about decent work, it means there are also issues related with policy, you know, policy regulation.
Not just work,
Not
but
just
decent work.
Yeah, decent work. But also the UNSO goes ahead and in terms of like now focusing also on the private sector. When talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, and the tagline is leaving no one behind. So relating it to gender, you know, before talking about private sector and gender, they were not in line, they're not matching. But now you can see that there are measures even set by businesses and the private sector to see they have 50-50 even from the board level. From the board level going down.
Is this happening now?
It's taking shape now.
Tanzania?
Yeah, even in Tanzania, it's taking shape. So it is taking shape. So the idea is, even at workplaces, the UN is encouraging like there should be conducive environment, both for women, even for the women to prosper, to also take leadership positions. But also, lastly, maybe what I can also touch on is on partnership. The UN is facilitating partnership.
Between who and who?
First between the UN amongst ourselves, but also the UN and the government, the private sector, the civil society, and other groups. And the idea is the UN agenda is not only for the UN, but it's our agenda.
Is it a UN agenda or the member states agenda?
It's a member state agenda, and that's why I'm saying it shouldn't only be a member state agenda, but other key players, they're also needed.
Okay. Felicity, quickly before I go to NS. So, what do you think, very briefly, are the benefits of a member state joining the UN?
Okay, thank you. I think generally, when you are a member of anything, you're more likely to benefit on what has been set for members. So this is what is happening, that all this conversation we've been doing, you see that UN just being there as a board or a forum for member states to discuss issues, you know, to handle things, to resolve conflict. It has also helped to member states to have a common voice. When they say no to this, most of the time they will sign, most of them. I mean, that is very good, because if you are not a member of the UN, meaning that where are you going to voice? I mean, whatever issue you want to voice is not possible. But this is very important that UN has really helped to bring everybody on the board and ensure that people have common voice. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult, as what my colleagues have already said, that imagine after 1945, if there was no any forum like the UN, I don't know if we could have been there. I'm not very sure. Otherwise, people could have been crossing borders and fighting. But now people are regulated. Because if there is regulation on different things, meaning that there's also harmony. Of course, in Kiswahili we say, in what? There's something, kwenye nini kuna kenge. What do they say? There's something they say. I don't remember properly, but I know that. So you have those. You can't miss them. Those people would want sometimes to just to make themselves blind and do what is not required. But you have seen also that still the UN put the measures. All the member states will say no. So, and because of this, we are going probably to put sanctions. You know, some countries have been sanctioned economically or even politically. So, and it affected the country when you get these sanctions. But these are measures to control and to regulate and moderate some of those who become a little bit weird, if I can say.
Out of place.
Yes, exactly. So, when we talk of benefit, I think there are so many benefits. One might not probably say as like you count them. Probably we can't count them, but there are so many of them which we all see that UN is really helping. Otherwise, some people will be moving here and there and go and fight another country and nobody is going to ask you. So long you are powerful, you are strong, you can do anything. But right now, as member states, we get support, like what we are saying, that like in DRC, there's conflict for a long time, but still the UN is still there, you know, supporting to stop the conflict, but also supporting humanitarian assistance, because during conflict there is always people who are affected by the conflict. But still, even with the natural disasters, which are contributed by, they can be man-made, but they can be natural, like floods and the other things, which of course linked to the climate change theme. Who does support? The UN still comes in, you know. So still there are so many things which the UN really is contributing, which I think we should all celebrate with the UN today.
Ines, do you think the ordinary Tanzanian who is struggling to make ends meet, poverty is a circle, is a poverty circle, really today understand what the UN is doing and the benefits of Tanzania being a member of the UN and sending our soldiers being killed in DRC?
I believe majority of Tanzanians do understand, because fortunately in this country we are also beneficiary of the UN funds and programs, and they are operating all over the country.
Exactly.
So inevitably people have seen what UN is doing, from vaccination of our children to the really programs which have been implemented at the community level. So to me, I think people may not know the nitty-gritty about everything, about all the treaties and everything, but at least they know
in general
and in practical terms, what is being done, which impacts their own lives.
Exactly. In fact,
you see, for example, this country, in this country, I think we are doing very well in terms of vaccination. The UN is one of the UN through UNFPA and the WHO, for example, they are at the forefront of championing, reduction of the maternal mortality. So these are things which are really impacting our society directly. Whereas we've got other developmental programs which are being implemented by UNDP, by FAO, by
all other agencies.
Exactly.
So I will dare say that people know the importance of UN.
Exactly.
Felicity, you wanted to come in before I ask you another question?
No, I just wanted to add to the benefit that, as my colleague has said, the UN, it mobilizes both financial and the technical support to countries, which has helped many countries, especially like countries which were coming from like just those very young countries, I can say, which got independence, you know, recently, for example. But even us, as Tanzania, UN does mobilize on behalf of the country resources in terms of human resource, technical support, as well as the financial to support the program, development programs. As he was saying, like here, I think UN is one of the key partner in Tanzania for health programs, but even for energy. I understand that. Yeah, I'm not expert on energy, but I know.
Water supply?
Sorry?
Water supply?
Probably, I think. But I can talk more of
that's
health.
a big problem. The president was confronted with the demand for water everywhere he went.
I know we have challenges, but if I can talk of the health aspect, we're one of the trusted partner as UN, both provide technical support to the country, but also the financial assistance. Because if you are putting $1 here and the government is putting $1 here and we are constructing a health center where women can come, deliver, and safely go home with their babies, I think that is one of the best contribution. And an ordinary Tanzanian can just see it.
Will that guarantee survival beyond 5 years?
It does, of course, because you know, the moment you have put together like the funding and then the structure is there, and as well as that the people are using that structure, you know, they understand. Me, I can give you where I have seen literally that this contribution of UN is known. Go to the regions where UN is working, the people, they know that UN is doing something. So now we are looking at the high level, at the upstream level. We know that people who know what is the UN, they know the benefit of the UN, but it's still going downstream. An ordinary citizen of Tanzania knows that the UN is here. So you could see that the benefit of the UN is known at the upstream level, but at the downstream level, it is also clear to the citizen.
Very quickly before I come to Rebecca, and more or less come to conclusion, because I'm warned we don't have much time. The celebrations on the 24th were held where? In Dodoma?
In Dodoma.
Why?
Capital.
The capital?
The capital of Tanzania.
So all the big shots in the UN system were in Dodoma?
They are in Dodoma, now.
Yes.
What kind of programs did you have?
In Dodoma?
I mean, the issues we've talked about here, that people wanted to know, were these being refreshed or recalled? How?
The people in Dodoma.
Tanzanians.
That the celebration will be in Dodoma.
Yes, and what you have just said, the benefits of being a member of the UN, are these being highlighted in an occasion like the
Of course. We
UN Day?
Yes, we normally do that. And in fact, today in Dodoma, they are all the representatives from different UN agencies are there, and there will be media, press release, media discussion with the different people, and there have been a number of activities which has been started, since this week started until today. So there's a lot of exposure to what actually the UN is doing in Tanzania. And today, I think summary of the briefs on what actually is happening in Tanzania with support from the UN is going to be said in Dodoma.
And as a matter of fact,
almost
each agency has got some representative who are there to showcase the work of the
kind of exhibition.
Yeah, exactly, of the UN.
What each agency is doing in a particular area.
And it probably, Mr. Simbe, you know the UN has an office, which is like we are using all of us in Dodoma. So you could see
common
that,
office of the UN.
Yes, a common UN. Yes, exactly, the office.
Okay. Anyway, we are left with very few minutes. Let's start trying to respond to the last question. Again, I'll start you and go this and end up with the NS Salam. So, all what we've just said, discussed and explained, the good thing about being a UN member and the UN itself, the development at midstream level, upper stream level, whatever, and with 194 full members and only 2 observer members, Palestine and what other countries is an observer member. Anyway, there's another one. There are 2 countries.
Is it Vatican?
Yes, the Vatican.
Yeah.
So, Very quickly, what's the future of the UN, in your view?
In my view, I think for us is to, I mean, next year the UN is turning 75, and there will be a number of activities which will start at the beginning of the year to ensure that people understand what the UN is doing. The purpose is to, I mean, we're trying to reflect back on how we're going to shape our future as the UN. That we have done a lot. 74 is an old man's age or an old woman.
Much younger to me.
Much younger, yeah. We can say that. But going,
Rebecca,
being
much
75,
younger to me.
75, that the UN want to reflect and see how best we can shape our future. And probably if I can just also highlight a small thing that like in UNFPA this year, we are celebrating as custodian of the International Conference on Population Development. This is the 25th year since this conference was done in Cairo in 1994, because this is all part of our agenda as UN, as part of the Sustainable Development Goals. So there will be a big meeting in Nairobi in November where countries will come back again to do the recommitment. What did we commit in Cairo, which we now want to look, have we been able to really achieve what we committed as countries? So Tanzania is going to be there as well to say what
I
we
gave you
did.
2 minutes.
Was it 2 minutes?
Yes.
So
you've got only 2 minutes.
no, because I wanted really to link this because
Yes.
what we have been talking and the whole theme for Tanzania, the sub-theme basically, is still critical for the agenda of commitment for the International Conference on Population Development, which is shaping all these things we are talking about,
Yes, yes.
and which the UN is committed to ensure that country will implement.
Population.
Thank you.
But do you think the UN will survive another 74 years? Will you be there? Of course you'll be there, but I'm not sure whether I'll be there.
The truth is, the young men and women and the old, they're determined to see the UN achieve its agenda or its targets. We're talking about maybe the Agenda 2030. So the UN is determined to see, when talking about issues of poverty, we eradicate poverty, of all forms of poverty. We're talking about education.
Can you really eradicate or minimize?
We can eradicate.
We can eradicate, yes. So we're talking about issues concerning like healthy. You know, the UN is into that space, and the target is before or by 2030, like we should have achieved the target. Talking about issues like polio today, there are countries that 100% like just away
So
from
you
the
think by
countries.
2030,
Yes.
the UN will have reached another 74 years? It will be less.
Definitely.
But it will still survive.
Yeah, it will.
All right, that's okay. Rebecca, will the UN survive? Particularly when you look at the issues of the global climate change and the so-called big power, one of the founders of the UN in San Francisco in 1945, has been adamant, particularly with the current head of state, the UN. He doesn't believe in the climate change. So do you think the UN will survive beyond the 74, along with all the issues?
Honestly, I am the only one here that is not part of the UN system. So maybe I'll give a different...
You're part of the thinking.
Yes, I'm part of the thing, but I'm not part of the UN agencies. And the way we look at UN, in as much that UN has achieved really quite a lot in terms of food, peace, security, but again, UN has contributed a lot in terms of addressing most of the development challenges of least developed country. And this is one of the things that is appreciated. When I was growing up, I understand UN as one of the peacekeeping agents when I look at the refugees in Kigoma and that side. So, yes, Kibondo and Arusha genocide. So even growing up, I know the contribution of UN at that level in terms of addressing most of the challenges through their program and projects. However, and I think this is a different perspective that I would bring in, looking in the future, there is a possibility that UN might not really maintain its relevance unless restructuring is being done. Why I'm saying that? Because of the extremely power imbalances in most of the decisions at global level, not only on climate change, but also in many other easy. It's very easy for UN and its allies to mobilize around issues in Africa, in least developed country or developing country, than the issues that are like concerning the superpowers. You see, it is very difficult for UN to react, and there's huge power imbalances, economically and in terms of food and security and governance. There's a lot to be desired.
Do you think the UN will survive another 74 years? Will you be there? Of course you'll be there, but I'm not sure whether I'll be there.
The truth is the young men and women and the old, they're determined to see the UN achieve its agenda or its targets. We're talking about maybe the Agenda 2030. So the UN is determined to see, when talking about issues of poverty, we eradicate poverty, of all forms of poverty. We're talking about education.
Can you really eradicate or minimize?
We
can eradicate.
We can eradicate, yes. So we're talking about issues concerning like healthy. The UN is into that space, and the target is before or by 2030, like we should have achieved the target. Talking about issues like polio today, there are countries that 100% like just away
from. So you think by 2030, yes, the UN will have reached another 74 years? It will be less.
Definitely.
But it will still survive.
Yeah, it will.
All right, that's okay. Rebecca, will the UN survive? Particularly when you look at the issues of the global climate change and the so-called big power. One of the founders of the UN in San Francisco in 1945 has been adamant, particularly with the current head of state, the UN. He doesn't believe in the climate change. So do you think the UN will survive beyond the 74, along with all the issues?
Honestly, I am the only one here that is not part of the UN system. So maybe I'll give a different...
You're part of the thinking.
Yes, I'm part of the thing, but I'm not part of the UN agencies. And the way we look at UN, in as much that UN has achieved really quite a lot in terms of food, peace, security, but again, UN has contributed a lot in terms of addressing most of the development challenges of least developed country. And this is one of the things that is appreciated. When I was growing up, I understand UN as one of the peacekeeping agents when I look at the refugees in Kigoma and that side. So,
Kibondo.
Yes, Kibondo and Arusha genocide. So even growing up, I know the contribution of UN at that level in terms of addressing most of the challenges through their program and projects. However, and I think this is a different perspective that I would bring in, looking in the future, there is a possibility that UN might not really maintain its relevance unless restructuring is being done. Why I'm saying that? Because of the extremely power imbalances in most of the decisions at global level, not only on climate change, but also in many other easy. It's very easy for UN and its allies to mobilize around issues in Africa, in least developed country or developing country, than the issues that are like concerning the superpowers. You see, it is very difficult for UN to react, and there's huge power imbalances, economically and in terms of food and security and governance. There's a lot to be desired. But again, for Africa, I think it's a high time for African leaders to really gather their unity and make sure that they forge that.
Through the AU?
Yeah, through the AU, it's AU, and that's a body that we have as Africans to make sure that African issues are addressed at that level and to be economically free. And this is one of the areas that the globe has failed to do, and the African leaders actually have not achieved to date. We have freedom and independence politically, maybe I would say, but we still have a lot of economic issues that are desired through World Organization, the WTO. Then we have this climate change. Even the decisions which are made at that level are not balanced. You know, we are suffering the most. You will find countries like US, because it's a superpower, today would say, oh no, we are no longer interested in financing the UN. You know, because they're a superpower. And,
or they disagree.
Yeah, yes.
Or they disagree with one agenda or resolution.
Yes.
They say we are going to pull out.
Yes, and UN is there left not to do anything because they don't have that muscle, they don't have that teeth to, you know, make everyone, you know, accountable. So for me, when I look at it, this is a huge gap. It's something that it's only Africans and African leader can be able to address. Or we adopt another mode altogether of ensuring our peace security, of ensuring for economic progression. So it's upon Africans to really make this decision. But in the 10 years to come, I see that gap widen.
Okay, so I assume you made a point here that you don't see the future of the UN in the next 74 years unless and until it goes through a restructuring and getting the third world countries, particularly Africa, get more involved in the top decision-making issues. Okay, although we had an African Secretary General. Very quickly, 1 minute. My time is over. 1 minute.
Yeah.
The future.
The future. I would say that the future of UN is very much determined by the dynamics of the day. That I'll put it that way. Because going forward, what I see, we are all witnesses to the recent agenda about representation of Africa, Asia, in the Security Council as permanent members. There's a strong feeling that right now, as Rebecca rightly said, there is some sort of inequality when it comes to representation at the top decision-making level. So by the mere fact that only 5 countries are making, have veto powers, some of the countries and continents do feel that they are somehow not equal participants in the world. So that's one. The second thing is, for sure, the kind of challenges, the emerging global challenges, do require some sort of common consensus and common understanding in addressing those challenges. So to me, that makes UN even more relevant going to the future. Today we are
the condition as
today we've got, there are emerging issues like cybercrime. As we progress technologically, more issues are emerging.
Exactly.
We've got globalization. We are talking about globalization, but the countries are becoming even more unequal.
And poorer.
Yes.
So, who will address that?
All right. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to cut you short.
Yeah.
My dear panelists, thank you very much for your contribution to the discussion on the UN Day, which was held on the 24th of this month. Very useful contribution, very good ideas. And your kind of summary or conclusion is equally very important. And some of you, of course, not alarmists, but stating the fact that it may not survive beyond 74 unless it goes through a restructuring and there's more space for the third world, particularly Africa, in the decision-making process. Thank you very much, my dear panelists. Viewers, I can't thank you more than what I've just said. I thank you very much for listening. So, on that note, we come to conclusion. Until next Monday at the same time, and on Thursday at 13 hours for the repeat program. On behalf of my very able panel, Rebecca Muna, Enes Sala, Felicite Bwana, Badru Juma, and TVC Television Crew. Thank you, viewers, and goodbye.